Hello students, today is the second session for class 8. We were learning about Renaissance. In the last class, we learned about the different types of sources that tells us about the Renaissance period. We learned about what is the meaning of Renaissance. We learned what are the causes that led to Renaissance in Europe. First, I told you it began in Italy and then it spread to all over Europe. And we also learned the features of Renaissance. In today's class, we are going to learn about its impact. Now, Renaissance had great impact in various fields. Let us first learn about literature. Renaissance period began a new era in the field of literature. The most significant feature of Renaissance, the impact of Renaissance, was the use of spoken languages. The language that was spoken in that country. The use of these languages like Italian, German, French, English. All these languages replaced Latin. Latin was used, but the writers, the Renaissance writers, chose to write in the language of the people so that everybody could read and understand the books. And what did they write? They wrote on nature, philosophy, science. They wrote on human emotions, men's strengths and weaknesses. Like in the previous years, you must be knowing that they wrote only on religion. Some of the famous writers of Renaissance period were, this is the name of the writers, the scholars and their works. Dante, the Divine Comedy. Machiavelli wrote The Prince. Then you have Erasmus, one of the important writer, William Shakespeare, The Merchant of Venice and the other books, John Milton and Geoffrey Chaucer, the Canterbury Tales. Okay, you can refer to this. It is also there in your textbook. This was about literature. Let us learn about art. The Renaissance period brought a revival in the field of art. Art in the Renaissance period was divided into the early Renaissance artist and the later Renaissance artist. The early Renaissance artists drew based on the themes in religion. So they use the religious themes, that is the Holy Scriptures. And the later Renaissance artists use the secular themes, that is themes from the literature, especially the Christian literature. Leonardo da Vinci was the famous painter. His paintings, The Last Supper, if you recall, you have learnt about The Last Supper in class 7, and Mona Lisa was one of the best achievement of the Renaissance art. The other two artists, Michelangelo and Raphael, were also equally important Renaissance artists. Michelangelo's statue of Pieta in Rome remains as the famous sculpture in Europe till today. Architecture. If you see the architecture, it is more of the Greco-Roman style. The important characteristic of architecture was the rounded arcs with imposing domes and tall pillars. So this was about art. Let us see about the exploration, the impact of Renaissance on exploration. Because this age is also known as the age of exploration. As I told you in the earliest class that they discovered new routes from Europe to the other countries. So there were many explorers who traveled to new lands to discover new places. Some of the important famous explorers were Sir Francis Drake, Sir Walter, Ferdinand, Christopher Columbus, very famous, who discovered America, Vasco da Gama, Hernando, Bartolomeo and Marco Polo. Now, this was about the impact of Renaissance on art, literature, on the discoveries, on sculpture and architecture. Not only in these fields, but Renaissance was also a revival in the field of science, philosophy, astronomy, medicine, etc. Renaissance has also built the courage in the people to challenge the age-old principles that were accepted in society, in religion and in politics. Two important effects of Renaissance were Reformation and Industrial Revolution. Let us first learn what is Reformation. Reformation comes from the word reform, which means to change. Change in religious, political and social system. So it was like a change in the religious views, the social views, the political views of the people. It first began in Germany in the 16th century by the Protestants who tried to reform the Catholic Church. And one of the famous leaders of Reformation was Martin Luther. Martin Luther publicly questioned the practices and the teachings that continued in the church. He also translated the Bible in German so that the common people could read and understand the teachings of the church. The German rulers and the common people supported Martin Luther. Though he was excommunicated for protesting, his views, his theses have a great impact on the people. Now, what was the impact of this Reformation? First is social and religious impact. There was a drastic change in the society and in religion. People broke the barriers of different classes in the society. They also questioned the religious dogmas which were accepted for many years. Secondly, individual freedom. Now in the last class, I have told you about one of the important features of Renaissance, that is humanism, where the Renaissance thinkers or scholars gave importance to human values, human worth and human dignity. So now people started thinking about individuality, individual freedom, individual happiness, and they believe that man is able to gain or achieve freedom or happiness without the help of religion. So that was the second impact of Reformation. Rise of nation states. The feeling of nationality in people began with the nation states, and the leaders of these nation states were quite liberal and enlightened thinkers. The Reformation also led to economic growth. There was a lot of economic progress due to trading, banking and new ways of financing, which led to a lot of prosperity in the country. The next effect of the Renaissance period was the Industrial Revolution. Now what is Industrial Revolution? Industrial Revolution began in England in the 18th century. Industrial Revolution was like a transition from the production by hand to production by machine, from a small scale production to a large scale production. That too with the help of steam engines, machines, and then which led to factories. Industrial Revolution was a term that was first time popularized by Arnold Toynbee, who was a British historian. Now, some of the inventions that took place during the Renaissance period were power loom, steam engine, flying shuttle, spinning jenny. These were the important inventions that took place during the Renaissance period, which led to Industrial Revolution. Now let us know the reasons why Industrial Revolution began in Britain. The first important reason for the Industrial Revolution to start in England was, or Britain, was the enclosure movement. Now, during the beginning of the 18th century, the main occupation of the people in England was agriculture. So, the farmers had small lands where they could grow crops and make a living. The landlords there, they wanted to increase the production of the crops by using machines. But since they had small strips of land, it was not possible to use machines on the small places of land. So, the Britain passed an act according to which the landlords could now take the land from the farmers or buy the land and then enclose it with a boundary. So then the machine could be used on this enclosed land. So because of this, there was a large production in England. That was the first reason why Industrial Revolution began in Britain. Second is availability of coal and iron. England had a very good climate which gave them ample coal fields and iron fields. Ample quantities of coal and iron which was necessary to make the machines. So that was a second important reason. Transportation. The invention of steam engine by James Watt was an important invention. After this, the transportation began in a different manner, where they could carry goods and people from one place to the other at a very faster rate. So all the finished products could be transported from one place to the other at a faster rate. Vast overseas market. In those times, Britain was a big colonial power. It had well established colonies in India, Africa and the other countries. And these colonies gave Britain large market for its finished products. So they could sell and make huge profit. Lastly, stable government. Britain had a stable government with a stable administration where the traders and the manufacturers could work freely. So they made the production in bulk and started selling them in different market and made huge profits. And with this money, they could also purchase new machines. That is why Industrial Revolution is said to have begun in Britain. Now, let us know what was the impact of Industrial Revolution. The first impact of Industrial Revolution was the rise of factory system and the end of domestic system. Because of new inventions, factories, industries became very important. So, the domestic system that was carried out in the villages, in the rural areas, did not have any income. So the rural areas led to poverty. Second impact was urbanization. Because these industries were all located in the cities or in the towns, and most of the population were living in the villages, people had to migrate from the villages to the cities or to the industrial towns and started living in the slums with very unhealthy conditions. So that was the second impact of Industrial Revolution. Lastly, the desire to have more and more production at a very low cost and make a huge profit led to Industrial Revolution. But this large production also needed large or new markets. So these countries started looking out for new territories to sell their products in those markets. This gave rise to imperialism in those countries. What is imperialism? That is having the control over the other country. That is one supreme or one powerful country imposing its rule or authority over the other. So these three were the impacts of Industrial Revolution. So with this, we end with a chapter of the Renaissance. We have learned about what is Renaissance, the impact of Renaissance in Europe and other places, and the effects of Renaissance. Thank you.